All right. Next up, we have Elaine Rock.
Yeah.
Okay. Microphone dance. It's on.
Yeah.
Is it on?
You just slide it in.
Elaine Rock is a writer who uncovers the untold stories of courageous, unsung heroes who changed history. A former history teacher and technology executive, she's passionate about women's rights and forgotten narratives. Her expertise, featured in PBS documentary Fly With Me, inspires and empowers by bringing hidden voices to light.
In April 1963, after 9 months of contract negotiations, the Stewardess Union staged a press conference protest over the final issue stalling an agreement, the 1953 policy that fired stewardesses at age 32. From behind the backstage curtains, Dusty peeked at the crowd and saw a sea of men with cameras and notepads eagerly awaiting the stewardesses. The attendance was beyond her expectations. We were lucky there weren't any other major news stories that day. As the curtain parted, the stewardesses, dressed in uniforms, displaying their girdled curves and nylon-clad legs, filed onto the stage with a man-melting stride. When they stood in a line together, they dazzled. The all-male press corps was mesmerized. Dusty was the first to step forward from the lineup. She moved slowly and seductively toward the microphone without knowing what she would say. The men ogled her while cameras flashed. Unhurried and enjoying the attention, she took her time posing for their cameras to immortalize the moment. Then, with a voice as sultry as Lauren Bacall, she leaned into the microphone and purred, "Gentlemen, I'm 36, 26, 36, 5'8", weigh 125 pounds, and have naturally blonde hair." She straightened her body and thought, what should I say next? On impulse, with a mischievous smile and fire flashing in her eyes, she said, "A Lolita I'm not, but do I look like an old bag?" The entire room instantly erupted with a resounding boom. "No!" Well, the men in the airline industry think women my age are worn out and too old for the job. I'm considered 3 years overripe. American Airlines has a written contract clause firing any stewardess hired after November 1st, 1953, when they turn 32. I'm 35, but hired before that date, so my job is protected by what we girls call the grandmother clause. I'm fighting for the unborn stewardess. I currently fly with girls who stand around and ask me what to do next. The trouble with the airlines is they're looking for 19-year-old Lolitas for the men to look at, but it's experience that counts more. In an emergency, a passenger isn't going to care who he's looking at. Dusty glanced back at the stewardesses on stage, paused, and then continued. Half of us are under 32 and subject to being fired soon, and half are over 32 and won't be fired. Can you guess which one of us are over 32? The men of the press shouted another thundering, "No!" I rest my case. Then Nancy explained that they were in New York for mediation over the union's contract, which expired the previous June. She said the chief difference was the 10-year-old clause requiring a stewardess to quit on her 32nd birthday. She added, a wiping out of the age limitation is a major union demand. Not even in Hollywood, where youth and beauty pay off, did anyone think of putting Marilyn Monroe or Liz Taylor to pasture. Jean Howard, a model for American Airlines advertising, was 14 months away from 32. She sauntered forward and admitted that she was 22 when she signed up in 1955. I thought I'd be married by now. I took the job for travel opportunities. I have 14 months to go before being forced to retire. I'm worried economically. I don't think I'll get an equally good job with the same benefits now that I'm 10 years older. Experience ought to count for something. Norma Pugh, 29, added that what we want to know is this: what's wrong with us when we turn 32? Virginia Murray, like Dusty, was over the age limit but still flying. She added, I weigh the same as I did when I was hired at 22. At 5'4" and weighing 115, I don't think I'm any less attractive than when I was 22. Not from all the marriage proposals I'm getting. The press conference made headlines nationwide and catapulted Dusty into the annals of American history. It also sparked a national debate on the airline industry's motivations. But do you think the stewardesses were able to turn the age roll over in negotiations the next day? No.
All right. Next up, we have Laura McHale Holland. She's a recipient of several independent publishing awards. She writes stories long and short that tend to bend reality, often with characters whose lives have gone terribly wrong but are ultimately redeemable. Shinbone Lane is her second novel. For more info about Laura, please visit lauramchaleholland.com.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you for everybody for organizing this event for all of us authors. What an opportunity. I'm going to start off with something I didn't think I'd do. There's a song that I wrote in the 70s that captures the spirit of the wonderful people whose lives touched mine, who inspired me to write Shinbone Lane. So, here we go. In San Francisco, I'll wear a beret, sip cappuccino inside a cafe all day. I'm gonna be an artist by the bay. I'll take a book and a banjo to play. To all the people I meet on the way, I would say I'm gonna be an artist by the bay. I'll have a sunny room with plants in every window. There'll be no place for gloom. Bye 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 baby. So by the water is where I will stay. Singing for quarters, I'll earn my own way every day. I'm gonna be an artist by the bay. I'm gonna be an artist by the bay, bay, by the bay. This is from the first chapter. With a backpack full of dreams slung over her shoulder, Maddie entered the Greyhound station. She took in the sweat and patchouli air as Keeley's parting words swarmed her mind. Nothing lasts forever. Look at the Beatles. No more songs from them, mind-blowing as they were. That's how life is, Cupcake. Maddie merged with the rumpled crowd, slinked forward and slumped into a vacant seat. Head cast down in the city of St. Francis, she brushed tendrils of her thick brown mane from her face, pulled out a sketchbook, and drew a few lines in charcoal. Boots, shiny as black sapphire, came into view, followed by a swirling lavender hem. A woman flopped in with an oof beside her. "Hello," the stranger said, her voice layered with joy and sorrow. Hi, the youth mumbled. She flipped to a blank page. A paunchy man with gold front teeth lurked nearby. He tried to pull Maddie toward him when she stepped off the bus. She batted him with her pack and fled inside, where she thought of pleading with an agent for a free ticket home, but then she remembered. She no longer had a home. And maybe I'll stop there.
Tommie W. Whitener is a former lawyer who has successfully transitioned to writing novels and short stories. Although the bar pilot has nothing to do with Russia because of his lifelong interest in things Russian, including his Russian wife of 26 years, his other writings often do.
Good morning. I'd like to read an excerpt from my latest novel, The Bar Pilot. Ryan was on board the 73-foot bar pilot boat, the Golden Gate, and being ferried to a piloting assignment 12 miles offshore when Steve, the boat operator, had his mate take over at the helm and said, "Ryan, look over there to the right. There's a whale tangled in a fishing net. See that big orange float? There are a bunch of lines and nets attached to it, and the whale is caught in them. He's just swimming in circles." "Wow, you're right," Ryan said. "The float must be attached to one of those concrete blocks the fishermen use for anchors." "Yeah, look at him thrashing," Steve said. "He won't be able to keep that up much longer." I called the Coast Guard and the Marine Mammal Center, but they both said all their boats are busy. They said they'll get one here as soon as they can. I told my mate to keep calling every 15 minutes until one gets here. Taking care not to approach too closely, they circled for more than an hour while the panicked whale spouted, breached, and continued to swim around and around like a tether ball on a pole. Ryan could see that the animal was a sperm whale, one of the largest on the planet, often growing to a length of 60 feet and weighing as much as 40 tons. He could also see that the rope securing the fishing float to whatever was holding it to the bottom of the ocean was wrapped at least twice around the whale's body, along with masses of thick monofilament fishing line. "Where the fuck are they?" Ryan said when they were well into the second hour of circling. "Someone should have been here by now." "My mate keeps calling," Steve said. "First the Coast Guard said a boat was on the way, and then they said they had an emergency involving a sailboat fire. I guess people on sailboats take priority over whales." "Okay," Steve said to the man at the helm. "That container ship Ryan's supposed to bring in is just going to have to wait a bit longer. Keep circling." Ryan and Steve fell silent as they watched the ensnared whale continue to drag the snarled float and net around the surface. Then Steve broke the silence and said, "Do you know the Marine Mammal Center treats hundreds of injured marine mammals every year? They save thousands of them." "Yes," Ryan answered, "some amazing work they do. But right now, I'm only interested in the mammal struggling right in front of us." When several more minutes had passed, Steve said to Ryan, "He's tiring. He seems to be thrashing a lot less, and there's less of him above the water. I think this animal is about to die right before our eyes. I'm going to cut him loose." Steve then said to the mate at the helm, "Ease right over next to him, real slow. Don't spook him." "What are you going to do?" Ryan asked. "Just watch," Steve said, and began to remove his pants. "Oh man," Ryan said, "I've got to see this." When Steve was down to his shorts, he donned a life jacket from a rack on the wall and picked up the large knife they kept on hand for dealing with fouled anchor lines and fender ropes. Then, with Ryan right behind him, he went out to the deck where the two men stood looking down into the surging swells of the cold, clear Humboldt current and at the whale, now almost motionless, a few feet away. Resolutely, Steve put the knife between his teeth and quickly went over the rail to belly flop next to the animal with a splash. Almost immediately, he was able to grab one of the ensnaring ropes and climb on to the whale's back, where, like a proud cowboy on a bronco he had just broken, he looked over at Ryan and smiled. Then he set to work. Methodically slashing one after another, he cut line after line, slowly reducing the mass of entangling ropes and nets until only the largest one was left. "That's it," Ryan screamed at him. "Cut that big one." Then, as Steve sawed back and forth on the last restraint, it finally parted. The animal ponderously lifted its enormous tail and with a huge splash brought it down like the curtain falling on the last act of an epic play. Then there was just Steve, left floating all alone in his life jacket amid strands and straps of filament and hemp. "You did it," Ryan screamed at him. "You saved him." As Steve climbed the ladder back to the boat, Ryan handed him a towel as if to a victorious boxer and said, "That's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. You're a hero, an honest-to-God hero." Steve didn't respond, but said to the mate, "Guess we can call off the Coast Guard and Mammal Center. Then let's get this pilot out to his ship. There's a fuming captain out there probably thinking bringing in his ship is more important than saving a whale."
Susan?
At 16 years old, Susan Church Downer was told by a cynical college professor that she had no ability to write and nothing to write about. Accepting his critique, she abandoned her dream until retirement. 55 years later, she reclaimed her passion, writing memoir, poetry, and 2 short stories. So far.
Yeah. So screw that guy, right? Anyway, my book, All You Care to Eat, A Novice Buys a Restaurant, is about the 10 years I owned Gaia's Garden in Santa Rosa. Some of you probably read there. But there was a lot that went on behind that you didn't hear about, and that's in the book. And most of the stories are about my employees and my ongoing cantankerous relationship with my business partner, who was also my ex and my best friend. What could go wrong? I used to say about the crew, I have a great crew, but they're not all great on the same day. And what I'm going to read to you is about one of those days. The only character I need to introduce you to ahead of time is Daria. And she was my right-hand person, a 22-year-old goth girl who had been with me for 3 years and worked her way up to becoming a cook. We were very close, or so I thought. Okay. Our night cook, Jerome, came in on a day he wasn't scheduled to work. It seemed my initial assessment of him as a Hare Krishna-type zealot was not entirely unwarranted. He wandered around the restaurant being gently disruptive, placing flowers, figurines, and notes with uplifting messages on available surfaces in the dining room and the kitchen. We watched him for a while in wonder, and then suggested he leave. The next day, he didn't show up for his 2 p.m. shift. Someone told me he was in the back parking lot, and I found him there, arranging camping equipment in the trunk of his car. "What's going on, Jerome?" His answer was a lengthy description of his inner life, culminating in his decision not to take psych meds anymore, but to deal with the mania himself, following the dictates of his own soul. Putting the last bundle in the trunk, he turned to me. "I'm getting married today." "Really? Congratulations. Do I know her?" "Of course you do. I'm marrying Daria." "That's funny. She didn't mention it. I'm going to ask her later." I wished him well, knowing he would never be returning to work. Excusing myself, I headed to the kitchen.
Daria seemed surprised when I told her. What? Of course not. We don't even hang out. It was the end of her shift, so I made sure she made it to her car without encountering her suitor. And that evening, an older couple showed up and introduced themselves as Jerome's parents. He had asked them to drive down from Cloverdale to meet their daughter-in-law-to-be. I gave them some tea, then expressed my concerns about their son's mental state. Their wearied response let me know I had come late to that party. Jerome finally showed up and greeted his parents. I want you to meet my bride. Daria, I said, where is she? She's in the car. I immediately pictured Daria's corpse propped up in the passenger seat, wearing a bloody white wedding dress with mascara running down her cheeks. I'm gonna go see her. I was both relieved and surprised to find her still alive, casually walking her dog. She assured me she wasn't there to meet the parents. She and Jerome were just driving around. Given our conversation just a few hours before, when she had indicated they were not social friends and expressed bewilderment at the imminent proposal, I was thoroughly confused, but didn't have time to follow up. I would soon learn there was a lot I didn't know about Daria.